Imagine waking up 100,000 years ago. There is no refrigerator, no supermarket, no bread sitting in your kitchen, no rice, pasta, or packaged food. If you were hungry, you couldn't simply open a cupboard. You had to find something to eat. And here's the surprising part. Ancient humans didn't survive by eating only meat. They didn't survive by eating only plants either. Their diet was far more complicated and much more interesting. So what did ancient humans actually eat? When people imagine prehistoric humans, they often picture hunters carrying spears and chasing enormous animals across the landscape. And yes, hunting was important, but that is only part of the story. Ancient humans were opportunistic eaters. They searched for whatever the environment could provide: meat, fish, shellfish, eggs, fruits, seeds, nuts, roots, tubers, leaves, and many other foods that changed depending on the season. There was no single prehistoric diet. There were thousands of different diets because humans lived in thousands of different environments. Imagine two human groups living thousands of kilometers apart. One group lives in a cold northern landscape. The other lives in a warm tropical forest. Their menus would obviously look very different. The northern group might depend heavily on large animals. The tropical group might have access to fruits, nuts, roots, insects, fish, shellfish, and smaller animals. And even within the same location, the menu could change throughout the year. A fruit appears, then disappears. A herd moves into the area, then moves away. Fish become easier to catch during one season. Plants become available during another. Ancient humans had to constantly adapt. Let's start with something people often underestimate: plants. Ancient humans gathered enormous varieties of plant foods: wild fruits, berries, leaves, seeds, nuts, roots, tubers, and other edible parts of plants. Some plants could be eaten immediately. Others had to be processed. They could be crushed, cut, soaked, roasted, or cooked. Archaeological evidence shows that early humans used stone tools to process plant foods such as nuts and underground tubers. So prehistoric humans weren't simply walking around looking for animals. They were also constantly searching the landscape for edible plants. But there was a problem. Plants don't come with labels. An ancient human couldn't simply look at a berry and know whether it was nutritious or poisonous. They had to learn which plants were safe, which roots could be eaten, which fruits were worth collecting, which plants needed cooking. That knowledge was incredibly valuable, and it could be passed from one generation to another. A child could watch an adult collect a particular plant. Later, that child could teach someone else. Over thousands of generations, humans accumulated enormous amounts of environmental knowledge. Then there was meat. Animal foods were also extremely important. Humans hunted, they scavenged, they trapped, they collected eggs, and in some environments, they caught fish and shellfish. Animal foods provided concentrated calories, protein, fat, and other nutrients. But getting meat wasn't easy. A large animal could be dangerous. Hunting could fail. And even after killing an animal, the group still had to process it. They needed to cut through hide, separate meat, break bones, and recover valuable marrow. Stone tools were extremely useful for this. Archaeological sites contain animal bones with cut and processing marks, showing that ancient humans were exploiting animal resources. And ancient humans didn't necessarily waste the animal. Different parts could have different uses. Meat could be eaten. Fat could provide valuable energy. Bones could contain marrow. Skin could become useful material. And other parts of the animal could be processed in different ways. For people living without supermarkets, every successful kill could be extremely valuable. But hunting wasn't guaranteed. That is why flexibility mattered. If the hunt failed, you needed another option. And in some places, the answer came from water. Rivers, lakes, coastlines, and wetlands could provide completely different food sources: fish, shellfish, crabs, mollusks, aquatic plants, and other animals living around water. Ancient humans were exploiting aquatic resources surprisingly early. Water wasn't just something humans needed to drink. It could also be an enormous source of food. And then there were foods that modern people might find surprising: small animals, insects, larvae, eggs, reptiles, small mammals, birds. These foods may not seem impressive compared with hunting a giant animal, but survival isn't about finding the most impressive food. It's about finding food that works. A handful of edible insects is still food. A nest of eggs is still food. A small animal is still food. When you're hungry, calories matter more than appearance. Then came one of humanity's most important advantages: cooking. Fire allowed humans to transform food. Some foods became softer. Some became easier to digest. Cooking could also make certain foods safer to eat, and it allowed people to process foods that would otherwise be difficult to consume. Imagine finding a hard underground tuber. Raw, it might be difficult to eat, but after processing and cooking, it becomes much more useful. The same principle applies to many other foods. Fire wasn't just about staying warm. It changed what humans could eat. Now imagine living through an entire year without a supermarket. Spring arrives. Some plants become available. Summer brings fruits and other seasonal resources. Autumn might provide nuts and seeds. Winter changes everything. Animals move. Plants disappear. Some resources become harder to find. So ancient humans couldn't simply memorize one menu. They needed to understand the calendar. They needed to know what appeared where and when. Their environment was basically a giant food map, but the map changed constantly. This is why the idea of one universal caveman diet is misleading. A human living in an African grassland had different opportunities from someone living beside an ancient coastline. Someone living in a rainforest had different resources from someone living in an ice age steppe. And archaeological evidence supports this diversity. For example, evidence from ancient hunter-gatherers in Morocco indicates substantial plant consumption. Meanwhile, evidence from approximately 45,000-year-old Homo sapiens in Germany points toward heavy reliance on large terrestrial mammals. Different environments produce different diets. And this reveals something important about humans. Our greatest advantage wasn't one particular food. It was flexibility. We could change what we ate. If animals became scarce, we could search for plants. If plants became scarce, we could search for animals. If we reached a coastline, we could exploit marine resources. If we entered a rainforest, we could learn its plants and animals. If the climate changed, we could adapt. Humans weren't specialized for only one menu. We were specialists at adapting. But none of this happened automatically. Someone had to know where the food was. Someone had to know how to catch it. Someone had to know which plants were safe. Someone had to know how to process it. Someone had to know how to cook it. And that knowledge had to be remembered. This meant that survival wasn't simply about strength. It was about information. An experienced person could know where water was located, which plants were safe, where animals traveled, when fish appeared, and where the group could find food during difficult seasons. Knowledge itself became a survival tool. So, what did ancient humans actually eat? The honest answer is almost anything their environment could safely provide. They ate plants, they ate animals, they ate fish and shellfish. They collected fruits, nuts, roots, seeds, eggs, and other foods, and the exact combination changed depending on where they lived and when they lived. There was no single ancient human diet. There was something much more interesting, a flexible diet built around survival. And perhaps that's one of the biggest reasons our species survived for so long. We didn't need one perfect food. We learned how to find food almost everywhere. The next time you eat a meal without thinking about where it came from, remember how different life once was. For ancient humans, finding dinner wasn't a routine trip to the store. It was a skill. It was knowledge. And sometimes, it was survival. Subscribe for more fascinating stories about ancient humans,